There is a lot of damage to financial damage and damage to life. But it's still miraculous based on what's happening. So if to thank the Eibishter for whatever was done in the past, and beg the Eibishter that in the future we have miracles that are complete and total, that nothing can harm us. Lam Natseach Mizmer V'David Yancho Adonai B'Yom Tzara V'Sagevcho Shem Elohei Yaakov Yishlach Ezecha Mikodesh U'Mitzion Yisaveka Yizker Kol Min Chesecha V'Eloscha Yidashna Sela Yitem V'Cho Chelvavecha V'Chol Atzoscha Yemale V'Ranna B'Shuasecha Shem Eloheinu Nidger Yemale Adonai Kol Mishale Secha Ata Yadaiti Yeshia Adonai Mashiach Yanehu Mishmei Kodshem B'Gvuros Yesha Yeminei Eile Varecha Veile Basusim Anachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Naskir Hema Koruv Nafodu Anachnu Kamnu B'Naseidov Adonai Yeshia Amelech Yaneinu Yem Koleinu. Okay, we're going to continue what we started talking about on Friday. And we brought the different sources in Gemara, and all these sources are pretty much saying the same thing, except about different tzadikim. So one is about tzadikim in general, one is about Yaakov, one is about Moshe, one is about some called Acher of Rabbi Yoshia, one is about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. But in all these stories in Gemara, it says that even though they passed away, and even though they went through the process like other people, they were buried, nevertheless, we say, the Gemara says that they were alive. So when people talk like that about the Rebbe, our first response is, whatever it means in the Gemara, that's what we mean, the same thing. We're using the same language as the Gemara. But then we need to understand the Gemara. What does that mean? How could you say Yaakov is alive when it was buried and everything else that goes along with it? One of the strongest things, remember we said that some people interpret Yaakov as alive means in a spiritual sense, that his spirit lives on. But the truth is that the Rebbe says if that were the case, then why would the Gemara ask, why was he buried? If the Gemara meant that he's not alive, he's alive in a spiritual sense, but physically he's no longer here, then what's the question why he was buried? He was buried because physically he passed away. So you go through the same process like everybody else. And the fact that he's alive means in a spiritual sense he's alive. So from this alone we see that when the Gemara said those words, Yaakov Lemes, good morning, the Gemara meant he's physically alive, and that's why it's shocking. How could you say that when he went through, he was buried and bound and eulogized and everything? So to begin to understand this, you have to understand that this idea that a person was a tzaddik, even if his passing is alive, doesn't really only apply to a tzaddik. It applies to every yid. Every yid has a neshama. And when, God forbid, the person passes away, what happens is, the only thing that happens in the neshama separates from the body, but the neshama continues to live. That's why the whole Maimon we just learned, Kol Yisrael, the neshama goes to Gan Eden, the neshama goes to higher levels of Gan Eden, the neshama enjoys whatever it enjoys spiritually. And not only that, the neshama also davens, prays for the benefit of its family and members of the family that they know down here. And they're still connected. So if we're to say that the greatness of a tzaddik is that even after his passing, his neshama is alive, it's not only a tzaddik, it's every person. So it must be that there's something more about a tzaddik than an ordinary person, that we say that even after his passing, he's considered alive. So the first thing is, a very important point is to understand a certain premise. One of the differences between the way we look at things from a Torah perspective and the way people see things from a scientific perspective. In science, people don't recognize the neshama. So what does it mean that a person's alive? They'll explain everything biologically. The blood is running, and this is moving this way, that's going that way. And basically, the definition of life is that the person is active, speaking, walking, talking, etc. And even more than that, the definition of life is when there's movement. If chas v'shalom, there's no movement whatsoever, even if a person doesn't walk and doesn't talk, and God forbid they're in some sort of a coma, but if there's movement in the heart, there's movement in the brain, they're considered alive. But if chas v'shalom, there's no movement anywhere, then by definition, to say that person's alive is a contradiction of terms. Doesn't make any sense. What about the neshama? I'm talking about science doesn't recognize the neshama, just guf. Just from the guf perspective, if there's no movement anywhere, any place, that person's not alive. According to Yiddishkeit, according to Torah, the definition of life is that the neshama gives life to the body. The neshama itself is alive. The body in its own right is something that has no life to it. And the neshama gives life to the body. So the neshama goes into the body, like it says in Chumash, Vayipach ba'apov, Hashem blew into him a breath of life. And that is what keeps the person, that's the definition of life. When chas v'shalom, you examine the body and there's no sign of life, it means that the neshama is no longer giving life to the body. In other words, this is only a symptom. In science, this is a definition. By definition, no movement means no life. In Torah, this is not a definition, this is a symptom. If there's no movement, that's a sign that the neshama is no longer, unfortunately, in the body. So theoretically, if I were to know somehow or other that the neshama is still in the body, even though there's no movement, that means that by definition, that person is still alive. So number one, that's what the Torah is telling us about Yaakov. That even though looking at him from physical eyes of flesh, there was no movement, all the symptoms are there like any other person who passed away. So the Torah is saying it's true, but Yaakov is an exception. And I'm letting you know that even though he passed away, his neshama is still in his body. Clear, right? Okay. Now the question is, well, what does that mean? Well, it's neshama in his body, but he's not living, he's not doing anything. This is the hard part to explain, but I'll try the best of my ability to explain it. Let me first use an example of something which is not the same, but a little bit similar. In the writings of the Arizal, I'm not talking about a story that's in a storybook, but in the writings of the Arizal, which is same source for all the subjects of Kabbalah, there's a story there. And the story is that the Arizal fell asleep. It was a certain Shabbos. It says which Shabbos it was. It doesn't say what the date, but it says it was on a Shabbos afternoon. I think it says Parshas Balak. And Arizal's student, his prime student, which was Reb Chaim Vital, the one who's always mentioned in Tanya, Rachav, he saw that his lips were moving. So when he woke up, he asked him, I saw that your lips were moving. He was very close to him. He asked him what was going on. So he told him that he was experiencing or seeing very deep secrets of Torah that he was absorbing. So he said, could you share it with me? So the Arizal answered him, if I would share to you what I saw in these last 2 hours, this is what it says. It would take me 60 to 80 years. The reason why this is brought down in many Maimarim, the Alter Rebbe, older Rebbes, the Chabad bring this down, is actually to bring out a different point. To bring out a point that when you see something, you can see infinitely more than when you hear about it. Like if he would speak about it, it would take him 60, 80 years. But seeing, he saw it all in 2 hours. Lahavdil, in English, is an expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words or something like that. But really, it's not only 1,000, it could be 10,000. If you would stand on top of the Empire State Building and look down, just take a look, sweeping look. And then someone would say, okay, give me every detail that you saw. It would take him hours and hours and hours. Every building, every car, every detail in that picture. So that's what's brought out in the Maimer. But I want to bring out a different point. If you would walk in the room, if I would walk in the room, what would I see? That Rizal is sleeping in his bed. And there's another bed, and there's another person sleeping in that bed. And there's a big difference between the two people. The person sleeping in this bed, it's 6, 7 hours of blank, nothing happening. This person is seeing and learning Torah, and learning not just Torah, but such deep secrets that it would take him 60 to 80 years to share with his greatest student, not to share with me and you. Me and you would take him 60, 80,000 years. With him, it would take only 60 to 80 years. That means physically, the person looks like he's unconscious, but in reality, what's happening is okay. Okay, could be Rabbi Hanok will come today instead of Rabbi Ozdebel, I hope. Okay, so 60 to 80 years of learning, but on the outside, what you see is two people lying in a bed. Both seem to be not awake, but yes, there's a world of a difference. Same here. Take it a step further. This is not unconscious. This is two people that they look like they passed away. One of them is blank. Unfortunately, there's nothing happening, and the other person is still functioning, and still things are going on, but naturally on a different level. But it still doesn't answer the question, what does it mean that they're alive? That still means the neshama is experiencing things, is doing things, but what's the definition of being alive? So to have a little bit of a better understanding of that, I was thinking of actually learning it inside, but there's a part in Tanya, I think it's chapter 37, where the Alter Rebbe talks about, it's a little bit related to what we learned in the last Maimer. What is the difference between the neshama and the guf? One of the differences are that the neshama is not physical, it's spiritual. And therefore, the neshama can't really have a full impact on the guf, because spiritual and physical just don't connect. Like the Rebbe gives the example in another chapter of Tanya, that if somebody would say to you, this concept is so deep, you can't even feel it with your fingers, it would be laughable, because concepts are not measured by whether you could feel it or can't feel it. Concepts are things that are not physical and not tangible. And when you talk about a substance like wood, like metal, like fabric, you can talk about it. You do feel or you don't feel. But something which is not physical, like the neshama, you can't feel it, you can't touch it. It's totally out of our range. So the neshama doesn't have its full impact on the guf. But how does it? Because we have a nefesh bahamis. The nefesh bahamis is not as spiritual as the neshama. It's more connected to the guf. It's in the blood. So the nefesh alakis is invested in the nefesh bahamis, and the nefesh bahamis is invested in the guf. So through the nefesh bahamis, it has an effect on the guf. But if, let's say, we wouldn't have the nefesh bahamis in the middle, the nefesh alakis alone couldn't touch the guf, couldn't move the guf, because it's too far removed. It's too spiritual to have an impact on something so physical like the guf. So again, so the Alter Rebbe says it's through the nefesh bahamis. And therefore, when a person does a mitzvah, on one hand, it's my nefesh alakis. But on the other hand, the fact that the guf, the physical body, gets refined is because it's through the nefesh habahamis. Now let's take that a step further. How do I refine the world? The whole purpose of creation is to make the world a dwelling place to Hashem, to transform the world, which means when I drink water and I make a bracha, I'm elevating the physical water. If the neshama is so spiritual and it can't connect to things that are physical, they're in two different realms. So how could the neshama bring godliness into physical water, bring godliness into a physical room, bring godliness into matzah, into tefillin, into mezuzah, into all the physical objects that we do mitzvahs with? What's the answer? What?
Speaking like
right. So it's the same thing again. Through speech, through the nefesh habahamis, it goes into the body, and the body connects to this. And I'm drinking the water, and the nefesh kiss is in it. So through that connection, I can affect the physical world. But the neshama itself, as spiritual as it is, but it can't move the physical world. Like I told you the other day, that if you would be carrying a bag that had 500 pennies in it, it would weigh you down. What if you carry a check that has $500,000 in it? How much would it weigh you down? Nothing. Because value is something which is not physical, and it doesn't weigh you down. It doesn't move you down. This is physical, so it weighs me down. The neshama is not physical, so how could it move the physical objects? An elevated table, a chair, matzah, tefillin, mezuzah, it can't. The only way it could do it is through the guf. So the guf is the conduit, because the neshama is in the nefesh habahamis. It's like I told you once. It's like the Russian dolls. One doll inside another doll, and the other doll inside another doll, and another one in another doll. The nefesh elokis is invested in the nefesh habahamis. The nefesh habahamis in the guf. And the guf is the one that moves things in the physical. So through that channel, the nefesh elokis could elevate the physical world. So once the neshama leaves this world and no longer connected to the physical body, it can no longer affect the physicality of the physical world. It can do amazing things in Shemayim. And whatever happens in Shemayim has some effect on this world as well. But it can no longer directly impact the physical world, because the neshama is not connected to the physical. That connection, the bridge was the guf, and the bridge is no longer here. Yeah.
I was gonna ask about the bridge. The bridge is the guf.
I guess the nefesh habahamis is the bridge between the nefesh elokis and the guf is the bridge between both of them and the physical world. And without a bridge, you can't get across. When it says that Yaakov is alive, that means that Yaakov is still connected to his guf. And whatever Yaakov Avinu is doing spiritually now is also being transmitted through his body and affecting the physical world, because he's still connected to his body. Of course, when we read a story in the Gemara about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, it means the connection is so strong he can actually be in the body when he chooses, and he goes to the Shabbos table of his family. But even when we don't see him in the body, and even though the body was buried, but the body and the guf are still connected, and when the tzaddik does what he does, he's able to impact the physical world now, to continue now, just like before. Which also is a two-way road. That means we can connect to the tzaddik, being that he's still, if he wouldn't be connected to us, there's no bridge, then we can't connect to him either anymore. Not in the same way, at least, because he's removed from us. But if there is a bridge, then just like he can connect to the physical, we in the physical can also connect to him like before. There's a lot of things which are the ramifications of what I just now said, which I'll soon explain, but that's the general idea. In other words, I don't have to close my eyes and imagine that I know what the Rebbe is doing here, what the Rebbe is doing. We don't know. We don't know. Not only that, I'll tell you a little secret. Even when the Rebbe was here physically and we saw him, we also did not know what he was doing. We had no idea. Even when the Rebbe was sitting there by the table, Farbrengen, saying L'chaim, we had no idea what else was going on. How do I know this? Because there are stories of the Rabbeim, how they were sitting with the Chassidim, but other things were going on, where they were communicating with different Tzadikim that were there, stories with the Alter Rebbe, with Tzemach Tzedek, with the other Rabbeim. And that means that even when we saw with our eyes, we saw just the outside, we didn't know what was going on. So how do we expect now we should know what's going on? And that was the story with Reb Nachum of Noble. I think recently I told it, that he once said to his student, the student said to him, we'd like you to show us a hidden tzaddik. So he said to him, look at me. So he said, you're not a hidden tzaddik, you're a revealed tzaddik. So he said, woe to me if I was what you see. In other words, what you see, it's as if to say, almost like, God forbid I would be what you see. It is much more to him than what we see. And the same with the other tzaddikim. So this explains the shocking question. We asked the question, of Yud HaNasi came to his family, not only came to his family, but he made Kiddush. How could he make Kiddush for the family? It's a halacha in the Torah. It says, Ameisim Chavshi. People who unfortunately pass away are exempt from mitzvahs. They don't have mitzvahs. In Gan Eden is Torah study, but not mitzvahs. We learned that in the Maimah. So how is he able to be mitzi his family with Kiddush? Someone who's not obligated in the mitzvah can't be mitzi someone else with the mitzvah. So the answer is, because why can't they? Because the neshama can no longer connect to the physical world, so he's not obligated to do mitzvahs. But when there's a tzaddik who's an exception, and he actually could come down in the physical body to his family, there's sometimes where tzaddik comes like in a vision. Person is sleeping in a dream and he sees the tzaddik. But that's a spiritual appearance. Then there's sometimes where the tzaddik comes like this way, like Rabbi Majeski, in his physical body, in a physical way. And then he's connected to the physical world, and he could actually be mitzvah the family. The Rebbe gives another example. And by the way, the Rebbe, this is also brought down even way before the Rebbe spoke about it in the Shalom. Chidah. That is a shul in Hebron. Anyone here was ever in Hebron? Visited Hebron? So there's a shul there, it's called Avram Avinu Shul. I know the history why it has that name.
He came back to the dominion.
Right. So there's a story that years ago, Hebron was a place hardly anybody lived there. So there was a small little handful of Jews that lived there. And when it came to Yom Kippur, they had 9 people. They were missing a tenth. And then they got very excited. Right before Yom Kippur, some traveler was passing by, and he was going to stay there for Yom Kippur. So they had a minyan, very excited. His name was Abram. And they spent Yom Kippur together. And they made up that after Yom Kippur's over, the man in charge of the shul said, you'll come to my house to eat the meal, to break the fast. After Yom Kippur, the first mitzvah we do is we'll go outside, we'll make the bracha on the new moon. It's dark outside. Good morning. So anyway, you make the bracha on the full moon, everybody goes back into the shul, look back the Sidurim, and he's looking for his guest. They can't find him. And everybody's looking around, they don't know where he is. So they go back outside. You never know. Person fasted all day. Maybe he fainted, maybe he's on the floor. They're searching, they can't find him. They searched for a very long time. Then they had to go home to break their fast. And of course, he was very aggravated. What could have happened to him? He can't imagine. And that night he had a dream. And he sees this person in his dream. And he says, don't be aggravated about me. Don't worry, I'm okay. And he said, I'm a neighbor in your town. I'm Avram Avinu. And I saw that you're so aggravated that you don't have a minyan. So I decided to come and be mashal the minyan. Now, it was very nice of Avram Avinu to be so nice and generous. But he can't make a minyan. If he's not alive, he's not part of a minyan. It's like a malach can't be part of a minyan. He's holier than all of us, but he can't be part of a minyan. He doesn't have an obligation to be part of a minyan. So you see them when tzaddikim like Avram Avinu come into a physical body, they have the same halachic status like a person who's alive, to the extent that he could be part of the minyan. But even when we don't see that, I don't know if it means that he's walking around in his body somewhere. We don't understand. By the way, there's nothing wrong with saying the things we don't understand. That's also fine. But one thing we do know, that his connection to the physical world hasn't changed. That's the main thing. And therefore, our connection to him hasn't changed, because that's, I mean, I don't know if you can tell me that. Okay. The last page of the back of this booklet that I gave you, I don't know if you still have it with you, is it's a story of a sefer called Shivchei HaBaal Shem Tov. This is probably either the first or one of the first. I think it's the first storybook of Baal Shem Tov. Not only first ever printed, but first also chronologically. It was done in the times, maybe right after the Baal Shem Tov. So the stories were written by one of his students, and it's considered authentic because it was done then, and it was done by somebody who was very reliable. So he has a story here that the Mezritcher Maggid had a son. His son was called Rabbi Abram, and the Chassidim used to call him the Malach, the angel. The reason why they call him the angel is because he used to act like an angel. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep as much as possible. His father would reprimand him a lot. In fact, the famous quote, which hopefully you're familiar with, that the Mezritcher Maggid said, "A small little hole in the body is a huge hole in the neshama," which means if you don't neglect the body's health, and if you neglect the body's health, don't think you're doing something better for your neshama. On the contrary, a small little hole, meaning a little damage to the physical body, you're doing much greater damage to the neshama, which means now times have changed. We don't do things that we used to do years ago. So this son, Rabbi Malach, when he passed away, the person tells the story here is one of his colleagues was Rabbi Nachum of Chernobyl, and he became hysterical. He was beside himself for many hours. And finally, when he came to a little bit, he started to tell stories about this son of the Mezritcher Maggid, the Malach. And he said he once asked him, "Do you ever see your father, the Mezritcher Maggid, after his passing?" He said, "Yeah." So he said, "Do you see him in a dream, or you see him actually alive physically?" He says, "Sometimes in a dream, and sometimes I see him physically." And he told him a story. This is a story that's written here. And the story is that there was a certain individual in the community, very wealthy person. Unfortunately, often wealthy people also have a lot of chutzpah. So this wealthy person was really giving him a hard time. He was harassing him a lot, the Maggid's son. And he mentioned it to his father, that this person obviously was one of the Hasidim or supporters of the Mezritcher Maggid, but now, instead of respecting the son, he was giving him a hard time. So Mezritcher Maggid said, "Tell him that he should come to me." Basically, come to the shul. What do you mean to me? The Maggid is not alive. But anyway, he called the person who used to be the secretary of Mezritcher Maggid, and he told him, "Go tell that chassid that my father wants to speak to him." The guy, of course, got the chills. What do you mean he wants to speak to him? He should go to the shul. Anyway, he wasn't home. He had to travel. He found him. And the person, when he said to him that, he said, "Come on, what do you mean you want to speak to me?" It said, he passed away. So he said, "Listen, don't play games. Don't play with fire. You're being called, go to that place." Anyway, he goes to the shul. And of course, he was in shock. Here's a Mezritcher Maggid sitting. He looked no different than during his lifetime. When he walks in, he says, "Why are you harassing my son?" So he started to defend himself. So Mezritcher Maggid said to him, "Stop defending yourself. All these are just excuses. The reason why you're doing it, because you think that I'm no longer here. Now you can do whatever you want. So I want to let you know that I am here, and stop harassing him. Don't you ever do that again." Of course, he accepted. And then he didn't walk home, he ran home. He was like panicking. When he came into his house, he fainted. The family woke him up and they asked him what happened. So he told them what happened. So he said, so this is not a joke. Let's go straight to the house of the Maggid's son and ask him for forgiveness. Okay, so they all went together. When they came to the Maggid's son, he smiled and, oh, my father spoke to you. He said, how do you know? Oh, he told me he's going to speak to you. It was as if he was alive. He's going to speak to you, he's going to speak to you. But I'm talking about the words he said. You think that I'm no longer here so you can do whatever you want. So this is another point. It's a very important point. I'm going to show you later, if we have the time, that the Rebbe himself, after the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe, continuously spoke about the fact that the Rebbe is here and he's really with us and the Rebbe is alive. And this is the language that we picked up is from the Rebbe himself. That's where he spoke about his Rebbe, about the Frierdiker Rebbe. And at one point, the Rebbe explained, like, so what's the difference? And you still can't see him. So what's it so important even to talk about it? What does it mean practically? So the Rebbe said those people who look at the Rebbe as if he's from the past, no longer, he's not here now, as a result of that, they're no longer committed in the same way to follow his teachings in the same way. The Rebbe gave two examples. This was in 1950. He said someone who was on Shlichus, after Yud Shvat, after the Frierdiker Rebbe was nostalgic, he decided now he wants to leave Shlichus. What does it mean? Before, he wouldn't do it because he was afraid the Frierdiker Rebbe would call him into his room or send him a letter and said, what are you doing? Who gave you permission to leave your Shlichus? But now he could leave. So you should know the Rebbe is here, and what he demanded of you before, he's demanding of you now, and nothing has changed. Then Rebbe gave another example of someone who took his son out of the yeshiva, sent them somewhere else, not in the yeshiva that was connected to the Rebbe. And again, he would never have done that before. Why did he do it now? Because he feels now that the Rebbe is gone, he's sort of free to do what he wants. So in other words, what this really means is that if I have a sense that nothing changed in the terms of the Rebbe's presence and the Rebbe's connection to me, then nothing will change in terms of me and my commitment to do what the Rebbe said. But if I have any kind of feeling, well, that's already part of the past. The Rebbe was, not is. And therefore, if it was, so now things could be different. Could you see this way of thinking? You understand it? You might say, wait a second, but Rebbe is a Rebbe. Why should anything change? And the answer is very simple. Do we do things that we used to do in the times of the Alter Rebbe? No, because it's a new generation, it's a new times. Things are different now. We even don't do things that we used to do in the times of the Rebbe Rashab or the Frierdiker Rebbe. Certain things change because the time has changed. So if a person says the time has changed, the Rebbe was, no longer is, and therefore we could now do things that we did different than when before. So that's one of the things that the Rebbe emphasized very much, that nothing should change. And just whatever you did before, and whatever the Rebbe told you to do before, you should continue to do and not change. And that's what it means on a practical level to say that the Rebbe is alive. On the other hand, this idea that the Rebbe's presence is found in a physical sense, we don't see it. This is all over in the Sikhs, but different Rabbeim. Even there's stories with the Mittel Rebbe, and the Rebbe once told a story by Fabrengen that once in the middle of Maimon he said, okay, he said, Baruch haba, my father just came, meaning the Alter Rebbe just arrived. No one saw him, but like I told you the other day, when we do Shalom Aleichem Friday night, no one sees the angels, but we still say Shalom Aleichem, and we say Barachem L'Shalom, and we say Baruchoni L'Shalom, and we say Tzeischem L'Shalom. We're talking to someone who we don't see, but we believe in Torah, so we believe that their presence is here. And therefore, there's many sikhs which talks about how the Rebbe's, many tzaddikim, not just the Rebbe's, many tzaddikim, we learn Torah and communicate with tzaddikim of a previous generation, or their own Rebbe or their own father, and they would learn Torah with them, and sometimes it was like dream, sometimes it was physically. So that means that there's no doubt that when even though they passed physically, it's not the same like with the experience of a regular person. So there's still a connection between their neshama and their guf. And one of the things which also the Rebbe talks about himself was something which is people don't notice, but it's there, and that is according to halacha, when you mention the name of a Rebbe or any tzaddik, you're really supposed to add the words Zecher Tzaddik Levracha. Out of respect, you're supposed to say this tzaddik should be remembered for a blessing. You will never hear a recording of the Rebbe mentioning the previous Rebbe and adding the words Zecher Tzaddik Levracha. We're talking about a period of over 40-something years. Not even once. They'll always say the Rebbe, my father-in-law, Nasi Doreinu. Never, ever did the Rebbe say that. Why? Some things we have to guess, but this thing we don't have to guess, because that first year when the Rebbe spoke a lot about this subject, the Rebbe is here, the Rebbe is alive, the Rebbe said, and the reason why I don't say his neshama is in Gan Eden, or I don't say Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, because Zecher means to remember. You have to remember. When you do something to commemorate or to remember, it's for someone who's no longer here, so you have to remember. But you don't do these kind of things for someone who's alive. And therefore, I don't say, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, my father-in-law. So that means that every single time the Rebbe spoke publicly and mentioned the Frierdiker Rebbe's name and didn't say the word Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, he was really making a statement that as far as I'm concerned, my father-in-law is alive. But there's still a question. And the question is, in writing, the Rebbe always wrote Zecher Tzaddik Levracha. In speech, not. But in writing, yes. So how do you work that out? What are you going to do with the free time now? I'm sorry. Unless I got a new message. Let me see. No. I guess they're both not coming. It's a free period. Okay, I want to know if there's any questions about what I just said. I want to chew it over, and next time we meet, we'll talk about the questions. Again, it's not something.
I have a question.
What was that?
Amy.
Amy?
Hi.
Yes.
Are there any tzaddikim that we say zechas? I can't remember the
We
phrase.
say what?
Are there any tzaddikim today that we'd say zechas? I forgot the phrase. The line that you'd say. The line that you said. Are there any
Zecher Tzaddik
tzaddikim?
Levracha?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Like who? So it's just the Rebbeim that we don't say that line?
It's not even just the Rabbeim. It's generally speaking by the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe never said that line. I don't think we heard the Rebbe say it about the Baal Shem Tov, the Magid. He just mentioned them, the Baal Shem Tov, the Magid, the Alter Rebbe. I don't think that we ever heard the Rebbe say it about them. Right. So that's the other question. Is this on one hand we say all tzaddikim are continued to live. On the other hand, we're saying that Yaakov is something exceptional. So again, without going into the details because not enough time, but there's a difference between a tzaddik who's a nasi and a regular tzaddik. This idea that he continues to live is mainly by somebody who is a nasi. Like Moshe Rabbeinu was a nasi. Of course, Avraham Avinu was a nasi. Yaakov was a nasi. The story with Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was a nasi. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, he was a nasi. There's something about a person who's a nasi that this applies to them more than others. But really, all tzaddikim are considered alive, which means that all tzaddikim, their neshama is still connected to their guf, but there are different levels and degrees how much and how strong that connection is. To be continued. We'll finish.
Okay, thank you.
The subject tomorrow. So where are you now? I know where you are. You're on the internet.
I'm at home in England.
Oh, wow. Okay. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Last one of the year.